The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com weekly sale. Go to StarCityGames.com/sale because right now you can save 15% off of all legendary creatures. That's right, from now until June 1st at 10:59 a.m. Eastern Time. 15% off of all legendary creatures, which is the perfect way to start a bunch of new commander decks, or if you like cube like we do, maybe you're looking to create a brand new commander cube and you need to get yourself a ton of legendary creatures. Well, this is the time to do it. 15% off all legendary creatures now until June 1st at 10:59 a.m. Head on over to StarCityGames.com/sale. The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. If you want to get the coolest Magic t-shirts and hoodies and stickers, go to coalesceapparel.shop. And if you find something you like, use gift code SCG to save 10% off at checkout. That's coalesceapparel.shop. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, you know, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more, before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
Welcome back, everyone, to the 540. I don't have a fancy insert today. I'm just Justin Parnell, which you can find at jparnell1 on Twitter. And, of course, my co-host, who we're going to be mining his brain for knowledge today.
I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. And we have kind of a doozy of an episode today, really the core fundamentals. We're talking about starting out building your own cube.
Yeah, this is something at some point everyone has thought about. And if you don't have a cube and you've been listening to this podcast, I have to imagine this is something that has crossed your mind, especially if you've listened from the very beginning and you're invested in consuming cube content and maybe you don't have your own cube. This is something that you've thought about. So hopefully today we can answer some of the questions you might have, or maybe reformat some of the questions so you can have a easier time answering them for yourself.
And this is a topic that's been requested a non-zero number of times, just explicitly by people like you mentioned that are looking to get into cube for the first time. Personally, I'm on a little bit of a cube getaway this weekend. I'm locked away in a friend's guest room, and I've been trying out some new cube designs for the first time. So a lot of the questions and answers and thought processes we're going to be going through today are really fresh in my mind, and some stuff I'm being pretty hands-on with right now. That's
great. That sounds like the dream, honestly.
Yeah. Outside of the complete garbage diet I've been on, it's been a real blast.
I mean, you know what? That's okay. Even for the over 30 crowd, every once in a while, you know, you just want to have a classical Magic weekend. Even if it's just at someone's house out of a convention center, part of that is treating your body like complete shit and having as much Magic as you can.
Yeah. Cubing until the early hours of the morning and eating at the restaurants that are open at those hours.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Ignoring any sort of dietary restrictions and making sure that you crush your sleep schedule and what your body expects. So yeah, I feel like that's critical. And as we get further away from COVID, I hope to be able to experience one of those weekends and then pay for it for the next 4 weeks after that.
Yeah. We'll be in a bit of a recovery period, but for now, I'm really digging it.
Good. So the question is how to start building a cube. And it seems like such a simple question. Well, you get a bunch of cards together and you sleeve them up and then you draft them. Well, that's certainly the ultimate end result of what we're going to be hopefully reaching. But if you want to do it in a way that is rewarding and fun and something that you hope that you're building to a very engaging way for you, who's now going to be a cube owner and cube designer, there's a lot of questions to get to that first part where you get the cube in your hand and you're drafting it.
Yeah, you want to have a good methodology. You want to be familiar with the sort of things you want to know before you get started, the sort of things you'll have to figure out as you go. And luckily, there's a lot of cubes that just exist now. A lot of stuff you can base what you want to work on. Number of articles written. Of course, we're doing this podcast now about where to start things off. And just really trying to figure out what you're getting into. I mean, I know that over the last year, people spending a lot of time indoors, locked down, getting into a new hobby is something that's like both very difficult, but kind of necessary. I recently got into brewing my own beer, and taking the first step to do anything was really overwhelming because like I just don't even know what I'm supposed to know. And people can be helpful and they say, do you have any questions? It's like, I can't have questions until I know anything. So hopefully we'll get you to the point where you at least know enough things to ask good questions today.
Yeah, it's saying basically you're at the point of saying, I don't know what I don't know.
Exactly. It's just like, well, I know I like drinking beer and I know that somebody makes it.
Yeah.
I know I like playing cube. I know that there are cubes. How do I get from here to owning my own cube?
Yeah. So the first question, and this is going to be the overarching question throughout this entire episode of this podcast. And this is not going to be the only time we're going to ask it. We're going to come back to this repeatedly. But the reason that we're starting here and we will ultimately be ending here is because it is really critical that you are assessing this and thinking about this in the beginning, the middle, and the end of this process of building your cube. And that is, in very broad terms, what is your goal environment for your cube? And when you first ask yourself this question, you might not have a refined answer. And I would say if this is your first cube, you're not going to have a refined answer. You're going to just have some sort of conceptual idea of what you want it to look like. You're like, I've played the Legacy cube. Maybe I want to do a cube like that. I really love Commander and I've heard of Commander cube. Maybe I want to do a Commander cube. I want to build a cube out of the cards that I own. I want to build I've heard Ryan talk about Tubercs. I want to build a Tuberc with my favorite 3-color combination. Mm-hmm. And at first, that is okay for the question to be very broad and your answer to be very loose, but you need to have some tidbit of something to get started on.
Yep. And for me, the framing that I often use is I ask myself the question, what am I excited about? What do you love about Magic? And that's going to push you in the direction of building what you want to build. Although this is going to be a little bit more familiar territory for Commander players, I think, than most competitive players. To be fair, competitive players will often stick to a strategy that they really like, play it year in, year out, innovate it, or just have the 75 sleeved up and ready to go as they can show up whenever they want. But just thinking about, okay, I like playing this deck or this style of deck and thinking, how can I package this experience so I have an environment that's just ready to go with however many number of friends that I want to or I'm able to play with.
Yes. And that's going to lead us to some of our first questions, but really having that initial overarching question, what is my goal for the environment? What is my goal for fun? What do I think is fun? What do I love about Magic? What do I want to replicate in an environment that I can repeatedly play? Mm-hmm. And again, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to say, well, should I have all of these really specific questions answered? And that's actually why we're talking about this. At this point, no. answering this first question, even if you feel like you're doing a bad job answering it, I promise that you're not. Having just a small portion of this answer or even saying, I think that this is the answer, that's totally okay. Because as we go through this process, you're going to have a better idea of what your own answer to this question is.
And as much as it might feel like everything is still really foggy and difficult to navigate, if your baseline is this really broad answer, like I want to play a cube that's about where the games are about value, that's still a fine starting point. And in fact, all the more particular stuff, like how invested you are in balanced gameplay and making sure all the colors are balanced or the line up well against each other, or even what kind of lands, what kind of mana fixing you want in your cubes, that sort of stuff, you're going to be able to pinpoint better if you start broad.
Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately, at some point, you're going to have all of these questions answered, or you're going to know where you are on answering the question. Even if they're not fully answered yet, you're going to have an understanding once you get to the end of this process of where you stand on these. Because right now you just don't know, and that's okay. That's totally fine.
Yep, and building a cube today is quite a bit different than it was building a cube 10 years ago. You can have a lot more, even just general ideas, even if it's not literally, I want to do this deck, I want to do this sort of thing. But there can be things that you like and dislike about some cubes. Like even if one of your base positions is, I want to do a high powered cube, but I don't want there to be a reanimator deck. That's a fine starting point too. Yeah,
for sure. And that's actually a very good point, Ryan. If you know a bunch of things that you don't want in an environment that you feel like you like, that's actually quite helpful. And that is going to inform your decision-making process a little bit down the line, which, honestly, we could probably just jump into. Yeah. So, all right. Before we do that, we have to pay the bills. So we are going to take a short ad break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what we're calling our stage 1 questions for cube design. Have some extra cards laying around that you want to get rid of? Go to starcitygames.com/sell. It has never been easier to turn your cards into cash, or if you're looking to outfit your cube or commander deck with some new favorites, get a 30% trade-in bonus when you choose store credit. No matter what your collection looks like, we have a method for you. Want to see exactly what every card you have is worth? Check out our buy list. Don't have time for that? Stick it all in a box. Send it to us, and we'll make you an offer with our ship and sell program. Or if you want a more personal touch, make your way to the Star City Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia to sit down with a buyer just like the old days. With the fastest turnaround time in the industry, get an offer in under 4 days when you go to starcitygames.com/sell. Selling has never been easier. All right, so we've had the question posed, the overarching question. What is your goal environment? What do you find fun about Magic that you want to replicate? So to answer that question, I feel like we have a few questions that we want to answer that maybe can help us inform how we feel about that big question.
Yep. There's going to be a ton of little things that you're going to tie together to get to the big picture.
Yep. And one of the easiest ways to get started, because this is something that, like Ryan was saying, like a decade ago, like when I was building my first cube many, many years ago, I didn't ask this question because it was just a cube. It only had one conceptualization of what a cube was. And the first question that I think is really important to ask is, how will you be playing this cube in most cases? Are you going to be drafting this cube with 7 other players? Are you going to be 8-player drafts? Are you going to be doing primarily 3v3 drafts? Are you going to be doing 2-player drafts? Are you going to just be doing sealed deck? And you're saying, well, how would I know that? Okay, great question. How many people do you have that you feel like you're going to be playing this cube with in most cases? Because when you ask that question, you might be able to inform yourself on how you're going to be playing this cube, because you might want to play an 8-person draft, but if you know you have at best 5 other people to play this cube with, that's going to be really difficult. And you might be setting yourself up for failure. Well, failure, and I'm putting air quotes around that, but you might be setting yourself up for frustration early if you're building a cube for an environment that will never exist.
Yeah, you want to consider what your play group is like. If your background is commander, how easy is it to get whatever number of people for your commander night? If you're a more competitive player, have you ever had a regular playtesting group? Like, are these people going to show up weekly to play your cube? Do you have just some small number of good friends that you're cool playing one-on-one, or maybe looking to play 4, 6, or 8 if it's possible? Or are you just really looking to get the full 8 players every time you can? Are you the person that hosts? Are you the person that's going to organize the groups and make sure people can get together? Because we all know that Magic players are a lot like herding cats when it comes to making things work. And whether you are the host or the right person to outsource the organization to, that's going to be really important to making sure that you actually get the games in and have the experience you're trying to provide.
Yeah. And that's going to be the answer to this question could be variable too.
Yeah.
We were talking about, and especially like over the last couple of weeks, we were talking about ways to play cubes with 2 players. I've played a ton. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of 2-player cube, setups, and 0% of those cubes were designed to be 2 players. Unlike, Ryan's Tuberc, which is, for two or 4 players. All of the times I've done that 2-player cube, it's been from a cube that I didn't design for that purpose. So it's okay if you're like, well, I think it's going to be this, and this. Well, as long as you're not trying to build a cube for 12 people and you can never get 12, that's important to know. And it's okay if you have a variable answer to that question of how many people is it and how are you going to be playing this cube. As long as you can eliminate stuff that you're not going to be able to reach, that is a very good starting point.
That's actually been a pretty cool thing for my group this weekend. Is the Tuberc, the 180 card model, largely was designed for one-on-one play, but I put in enough cards so that you could do 4-player drafts. And we have done primarily 4-player drafts this weekend. I think we have 11 people here total. And, the reason you go to 11 is so you can get 8. But I don't think we've done more than 1, maybe 2 8-player drafts. We've done some 2s, but it's just kind of easier to get 4 people excited at the same time. And previously, I've had a lot of just bad experiences playing 4-player drafts with cubes with 360 or more cards. Just the decks are so rarely cohesive. Nobody's ever excited about anything. You don't see the right fixing. You don't see your flagship cards. Like, it's cubing the way you have to, not the way you get to. And if you
that's a great way to say that.
Yeah. And if you're part of a group that, maybe 1 or more of your friends, they have cubes that are designed for 8, but sometimes you're hitting 2 or 4 and you want to work on something yourself, like just showing up to the cube nights where you're not sure that people are going to be there with your Tuberc and saying, hey, this would be a fun thing to try with 4, that can be, where you can start to play your cube too.
4 has been my least favorite number, other than an odd number, obviously. Mm-hmm. My least favorite even number of people to do any sort of cube environment with. So that's encouraging that you were able to, put that to the test and it worked out with Tuberc.
Yeah, it has worked just much better than I anticipated, honestly. Because, it was largely just designed for 2, but there's enough cards for 4. And I was a little concerned that when you did 4, there'd be like a best deck and it would show up and clean up every time. But as long as like all the cards are good and you have enough fixing that people have a little bit of control over what colors they're playing. And I've actually been able to observe a lot of things more efficiently in terms of balance for the whole cube doing the 4-player drafts. They'll make changes that impact the 2 players. But if we do a bunch of 4-player drafts, which we have been doing, you see the cards that are always going last when, in theory, the deck that could play that card is always there. Then you just way more efficiently determine, okay, like this card is not a card anybody wants to play.
Yeah, very clearly. There's so few people, and there is the person I thought would want this in the draft, that drafted in the draft, and they don't want it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. It answers the question pretty clearly. Okay, so beyond formats and players, which I think is a great starting point. Another one that I always encourage people to consider is, what is your budget for this cube? And some people will go into a cube with a pie in the sky idea of what they want, and Magic cards are quite expensive. Now, if Ryan, I don't know if you know this, but if you're a Star City Games premium member, you do get 10% off of your singles.
You can also keep an eye on the weekly sales. Another great way to save money on your cube staples.
You definitely can. But we always want people, or I always want people to really think about, like, how much money are you interested in spending, or in some cases willing to spend, I guess, for people that have kind of a budget that they're willing to balloon a little bit. But, you know, are you starting with cards that you own? How much of the cards that you own are you going to be putting into this cube? How many new cards are you going to be buying? Are you willing or interested in jumping in and like fancifying your cube immediately? And, you know, you could say, well, of course you don't want to do that. But, you know, if you're like, I want to get cool versions of these cards, well, those are generally more than regular versions of the cards. And if you know that you want to do that, it doesn't necessarily hurt you to kind of plan for that in your budget, because it's better to buy, if you want to get a Ponder and you don't have a Ponder, and you're like, I really want to get that old bordered Time Spiral remastered Ponder. Well, it's better to buy that one than first buy a regular one and then buy the other Ponder from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, and this is the sort of thing that can really add up. In particular, something that happens to me, and the conversation around the price of Magic is often based around the most expensive cards. You know, like, I can't, like, I don't think I'll really ever own a full set of Power. Looking at prices right now, for a lot of people, that's going to be dual lands. For a number of players, that's even fetch lands. You know, like, you can't justify $50 for a fetch land. Not everybody can do that. And it's important to also look at the whole broad scope of things, because 11 $5 cards outpaces your one $50 card. So setting kind of like a ceiling for individual cards is going to be more important than, you know, saying I'm not going to buy this most expensive thing, because you're putting a lot of cards together. And something I've mentioned on the podcast before, my first cube was a Pauper cube. Like, with the budget I had at the time, just getting a bunch of $5 cards was a non-starter for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the case with a lot of people. You know, I always really encourage people for their first cube to build a cube that is inexpensive. And look, you can fancify a Pauper cube significantly. So just because something is using commons and uncommons or the like doesn't mean that you can't really spruce it up. John Suarez has a Pauper cube that is, everything is basically the most expensive version that it can be. And if there's not an expensive version, it's like a misprinted or miscut version.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's like he's got like test print cards in there. He's got like, oh, Wild Mongrel. There's no expensive Wild Mongrel. How about a test print Wild Mongrel?
That's so berserk.
Yeah. he's got like alpha cards in there. I think he sold some of the alpha cards because they have like, even the commons have got like wildly expensive, but like, yeah. So he was just like, I'm gonna have a Pauper cube, but I'm gonna make it the most expensive Pauper cube you could possibly make it.
I did end up foiling out my Pauper cube back when I kept it together, and I've actually started looking at piecing some of that stuff out, and the upfront cost of a lot of these foils is steep, but you look at them a couple years later. Like, I looked at the price of Urza Block Rancor in foil. I was like, there's no way I spent that on this card.
Yeah, you probably didn't. Yeah, I doubt you spent $50 on that foil Rancor.
No, not a chance.
But anyway, identifying what your budget is, of Ryan's point of like putting really not a budget for your whole cube, but like for individual cards, I think is a really great one, because this is a thing we're going to touch on a little bit later. But like, there's not 100% guarantee that $50 card, that $150 card, that might get cut from your cube.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know. And then
I have spent more than that on a card that's been cut from my cube.
Yeah. So, and, but having an idea of what you're willing to spend. And of course, that's just for cards you're buying. If you already have that card in your collection, yeah, just feel free, add it in. But when I'm saying budget, I don't mean the value of the cards. I mean, like, if you literally had cash in your wallet, how much of that cash are you willing to pull out with your hand and say, this is now going into my cube?
Yep. And also keep in mind the cost of sleeves. If you're on when I built my first Pauper cube, buying enough sleeves was actually the most significant financial barrier.
Yeah, especially for Pauper, because the sleeves that's a static price.
Yep.
For the most part. I recommend getting nice sleeves. I don't think sleeves are a thing to skimp on. Yeah, because you are going to be you're going to be kicking yourself down the road if you get crappy like $4 a pack sleeves. It is just not worth it.
You will be changing them, and if they're low quality and they split, you're going to split your cards too. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the worst thing, is when a sleeve betrays you and hurts a card, you're never going to forgive those sleeves. All the sleeves. What I would recommend is going to your LGS and asking how much a case of sleeves would be. Because all of the major sleeves manufacturers, this is Dragon Shield, this is Ultimate Guard, this is Ultra Pro, even BCW, all of those sleeve manufacturers sell sleeves in a case. The packaging might be different, but ultimately you're going to get somewhere between 6 to 10 sets of sleeves together. And if you have a good relationship with your LGS, they'll probably give you a discount on that many sleeves at a singular time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's better than buying them piecemeal. So if you're just like, hey, when you place your order next time, if you can get me a case of Dragon Shield black matte sleeves.
Yeah.
How much would that cost?
I guarantee that your LGS likes having guaranteed sales.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're like, I'll buy this many sleeves if you just give me like, because it's going to be cheaper for them too when they're buying it in a case rather than like onesie twosie, which they don't generally do, but depends on the size of your LGS. So that should be a win-win situation, and I would be shocked if you went to a local game store and they were like, "Nah, we're just going to charge you full price for these 10 packs of sleeves."
Yeah, you can often build the sort of rapport where you can get a deal on that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially if you're like, "Hey, I'm building a cube." Let me tell you a thing that stores love to hear is people building cubes. So that is, but taking the cost of sleeves into consideration.
In particular, if you're buying your singles from that LGS, which I hope you're doing.
At least some of them, I'm sure you are.
At least some of them. But if you're a member of the community that drives people coming to that store to, purchase their wares, that's obviously valuable.
Yep. Ron, do you have a sleeve that you are a fan of above the rest?
Dragon Shield black mats.
Yeah. I also have Dragon Shield matte.
All that I use, and the black ones are just opaque. That's a big deal.
Yep. Mine is in Dragon Shield matte purple, which are also opaque. Purple's just my favorite color, but the blacks are solid. They're the most classical, the new classics, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. So now that you asked these initial questions, how am I going to be playing this cube? How many people am I going to have this cube? What is my budget? I want to turn back around and go back to our first question. What is your goal? What is your goal environment? Given the context of the questions you've just answered, what am I trying to build? What is going to be fun to me? And chances are, after you answer these questions, your answer for that overarching question has probably shifted from the very first time you considered it. And if this is the first time building your cube, it should. Because if you go through and you're like, nope, got everything right on the first try, it's like, okay, well, you've obviously done a significant amount of homework, or you're lying about how many cubes you've built. Because the difference between having built one cube and having built 0 cubes is a massive difference. as someone, and I'm sure Ryan can agree, that has been on both sides of those coins, of course.
Yeah, if nothing has changed, I don't know if you're lying to me or to yourself, but you are lying. That much is certain.
Yes, exactly. And that doesn't, and again, it's not, it's, if let's say you're like, nothing has changed. Why is that? If the answer is, well, I already thought about all of these questions ahead of time before I answered the first question. Well, great. That means you haven't, nothing has changed. You just didn't need to do this part because you've already done it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's totally fine. But just as long as you've gone through the progression of these questions to have an understanding of what your starting point is, then that's really all that matters. Because that's really where we are. We're still at the starting point.
Yes. Yeah. And you go from having this idea, okay, what's my ideal environment? What am I excited about? And you start looking at a list of cards on a page, however you organize them. I know that Justin's a big spreadsheet guy. You like to make your own spreadsheets. I like to use the cube tutors and the cube cobras and see everything color coded and sorted for me.
Yeah, I just like it the hard way. I don't know. So ultimately what it is I want to control the data in the exact way that I want it.
I want to complain about the way somebody else decided to put it.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's really important. You don't want to give up too much complaint equity because sometimes you can't get it back.
True.
Yeah. All right. So anything you want to add on to this kind of these stage one questions or the second part of the overarching question?
I'm sure that we're going to come back to a lot of this stuff. Nothing immediately comes to mind, but there's a lot of ground to cover, and we're just getting started.
Great. Okay. Well, in that case, we're going to take our second break and be back in just a moment.
Taking a quick break from the podcast to talk to you very quickly about Star City Games Premium and why you should become a Star City Games Premium member. First, me, Cedric Phillips. I'm the online content coordinator for Star City Games. So if you like me and you want to see me keep my job, you should sign up. And if you don't like me, we're not going to talk about that. Okay, let's talk about what you actually get for signing up and paying the $7.99 per month to become a premium member, which is less than the cost of a couple of booster packs, by the way. It's actually, I think, if memory serves, like less than a collector booster, and they got these set boosters and all these different types of boosters now. So look, let's just say for less than a collector booster a month, you receive the following benefits. Are you ready? 5% discount on all Magic the Gathering sealed products, 10% discount on all Magic the Gathering singles, 15% discount on all supplies, which include card sleeves, deck boxes, binders, all that stuff for when real life play gears back up again. You also get some free entry to some SCG Tour Online events if you're digging the SCG Tour Online and want to play in some of those tournaments like our satellites and stuff like that. A couple of freebies out there. But let's not forget the big one, the exclusive access to Star City Games website content from many of Magic the Gathering's top players and fan favorite personalities like myself, like Patrick Sullivan, like Sheldon Menery, like Paulo Vitor Damaderosa, who is way too good at Magic the Gathering, Jerry Thompson, Autumn Burchett, Brian Gottlieb, Todd Anderson, Ari Lax. I'm going to forget somebody here and they're not going to like me for it. Brad Nelson, who's back writing for Star City on a weekly basis. Michael Majors, Dominic Harvey. The list goes on and on and on. That's how I saved myself there for people that I may have forgotten. Ryan Sachs, I didn't forget you. I swear, Ross Merriam, I didn't forget you either. Shaheen, hello. Stop playing bad control decks. Anyway, $7.99 a month. Less than the cost of a collector booster pack. Get awesome content, discounts 5, 10, 15% across the board. Get access to some SCG Tour online events for free as well. Head over to starcitygames.com/join premium for more information. With that, back to the pod.
All right, so moving on to what I am calling the stage 2 questions. You've already gone through the initial process of first identifying your goal, asking these really initial questions about budget and size and how you're going to play it, and then going back to that initial question of what is your goal environment. So now, after you've asked that question a couple times, these next set of questions are really kind of fleshing out what the cube is going to look like from a, maybe not a progression standpoint, but how it's going to look like initially, like after you first build it, and then what you kind of want it to look like ultimately.
Yeah, you're building up, you kind of get your foundation and you start to put up some structures. And yeah, as you lock in more parts, if you want to make dramatic changes, you start to have some things you'll have to knock down. You know, we are making progress in our building.
Yes, it's a great way to look at it. So, and the first question that I like to ask is, are you okay with a slow progression towards your goal? And hopefully the answer is yes. But that also might depend on some of the other questions you've asked yourself before, primarily the budget question. Because maybe your goal is to have a cube that is similar in function and design to the legacy cube on Magic Online.
Mm-hmm.
But your budget certainly tells you, I can't just make this cube immediately. I don't have $15,000 to throw at a cube, because most people don't.
Right.
Now, the good thing about Magic cards is the return on investment is generally pretty good. If you sell your cards, if you just don't sell them, then the return on investment will still be good, assuming that you cease to own them at some point. But are you okay with the slow progression? If you're not, then you need to kind of go back and say, well, does my budget allow me to answer that question as a no? And if you are, that's good, because you're probably going to want to start with a group of cards that might not be your final list of your initial cube. And I want to kind of set that aside. When I start designing a cube, I just kind of fill it out with cards. Once I figure out the size of the cube, or at least my initial assumption for the size of the cube, I'm just going to fill it out with cards. And then I'm kind of going to go back and change out those cards before the actual factual first iteration of that cube. So there's going to be like a step 0, which is kind of where we are now. And that's going to be the slow progression of getting towards that goal environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just one last thing on the budget thing. Magic, or casual Magic anyway, has a really nice built-in try before you buy mechanic. As long as you represent the cards in a way where people know what's happening in the game, I don't imagine your friends are going to be too upset if you have Sharpied the words Underground Sea onto the back of a card. I think you can get by with that for a while.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, and that's okay. And, you know, it's like if you are trying to build towards something, knowing, you know, what you're ultimately going to have and putting a placeholder, that's totally fine. Whether you want it to be a Sharpie card or whether you're like, you know what, I have a underground river hanging around instead of an underground sea, I'll toss that in for now.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just, you know, it's going to be the placeholder for underground sea.
And maybe
eventually.
you really just find out that you like playing with underground river.
Yeah, you're like, man, this really helps the aggressive decks quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about Magic. They print a lot of cards, and different people like different things. And the most popular thing is not always, and maybe not even commonly, the right thing for you.
So a fun story about that, and this is my favorite story, is, Ryan, you are likely familiar with the card Psychotog.
Oh, yeah.
And initially, when Psychotog was first printed in Odyssey, it was not the metagame menace that it ultimately grew to be. And legend has it that Psychotog was first used in a blue-black control deck as a placeholder for a Shadow Mage Infiltrator. So before someone had Shadow Mage Infiltrators, they're like, I'll just use these Psychotogs in place of it and see how this works until I get Shadow Mage Infiltrators. And I, you know, split it. You know, had 2 of those and 1 Shadow Mage Infiltrator. And then they were like, wow, the Psychotog's actually put in work. And ultimately, the rest is history, as that became one of the most independently dominant decks of any like metagame in the history of Magic for Standard. All because someone was like, you know what? I'm just going to put this card that has the same casting costs, has a little bit of similar function, doesn't provide card advantage, but who knows?
A real chocolate and peanut butter situation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, honestly, for me, I'm always okay with that slow progression, and knowing that you're going to make changes forever. Cube is a constantly evolving thing. Like you're not going to have a finished product in most cases.
Oh yeah. My cubes change pretty constantly, and it's not just because there's a new set. I'm always thinking, well, I want to try this card. There's many thousands of Magic cards, all kinds of knobs you can turn and different things you can try. And if it's just something as simple as I'm kind of tired of drafting or losing to this card, or this card is not getting drafted, plenty of reasons to make changes. We're talking about placeholders just in terms of like budget previously. Something that I really do when I'm working out something that's a more thematic cube, I use just like generic power level placeholders, where I've written a little bit about some deeply thematic cubes. My spooky cube is kind of the big one, where the archetypes really don't look too much like a lot of what you see anywhere else, certainly in the ways they combine. And it's just like, you can just put Ponder and Lightning Bolt and Path to Exile, that sort of thing. Just like 1-for-1 efficient cards in your cube. And like, if they make the cool things in your cube worse, then you cut them over time. But with something as simple as a Ponder or a Preordain, it might be the case that the Ponder and Preordain decks gain some noticeable win percentage, but just even in the games themselves, you're not going to feel that. Like if the Ponder decks are winning more, they're casting a Ponder. I mean, who cares?
Yeah, those aren't the sledgehammer cards.
Yeah, you can't just like toss Demonic Tutor in. Like it'll be pretty obvious when the Demonic Tutor decks are winning because of it.
Yeah. I'll put it this way. A good way to gauge this of saying, well, what are the powerful cards that are like that are making like big impacts to specific games? If you are playing a game of Magic against one other person and you have two games beside you, when you say out loud, I'll cast blank, do other people look over to your game? When you say I'll cast Ponder, no one looks. When you say I'll cast Demonic Tutor, people are going to look and be like, oh, what are they getting?
What do you mean Soul Rings in this cube?
Yeah. So if people look, if people notice, like they are like paying attention to what you are doing, that's a good note of like, maybe this card is quite powerful or is having a large impact on the game. And this is literally the least scientific approach of anything I think I've ever said, but I also think it passes the eye test, so I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, it just kind of makes sense. Based off of not just the fact that people are looking, but what they're saying. Like if you jam Oko and someone's just like casting their 2-mana 2/2 with some marginal effect, and you're like, how on earth has anybody ever beat that? You can tell pretty quick how people feel about cards like that.
Well, that goes into my next question. Are there power level considerations for your cube? And a lot of this is going to be exclusion rather than inclusion, right? So you're saying, I don't want to have Oko. I don't want to have Grim Monolith. I don't want to have Library of Alexandria in my cube.
Yeah, and there's sort of a dynamic between Vintage Cube and any other cube, where Vintage Cube says, is this the most powerful type of this card? All right, give me. Keep the monsters in this box and away from everything else. Every other cube is saying, oh, this is maybe more of a Vintage Cube thing, or like, this is too powerful for me, where Vintage Cube is going to cut you out if you're not one of the best of all time.
Yeah, for sure. Even something like, a card we were talking about last week. Yeah, I believe we were talking about it last week. Let's say you have a Pauper Cube and you're like, should I include Fall from Favor in this cube? Is that too powerful for my all commons cube?
Yeah,
and I think that's a good question to ask.
You definitely want to ask that sort of thing, especially as you get an idea of which color is most powerful in your cube. And it will often be the case that the best color is not the best color because it has the most well-rounded workhorse type cards. It's not because it has the best, 3 mana, 3/3 into 4 mana card that impacts the battlefield sort of cards. It's because it has the most end the game when this card resolves or is in your hand type cards.
Yeah. When it's put on the stack, the game changes in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But figuring out what those power level considerations are is these are all starting point questions. That's a good starting point. But what you're ultimately going to realize is that if you are making power level decisions, you're going to miss things. And sometimes you're going to miss things by the context of the cube. Like you might not look at a card. A good example of this, I think, initially was Fracture Identity. I think when that was previewed, it wasn't thought to be like this massive like cube powerhouse. It's like, oh, that looks like a sweet card. And then when people started playing with it, they're like, oh no, this card is insane. It's completely busted. So you might have cards that you are evaluating and you think that they're okay. And then when you start to get into kind of the initial playing of your cube, you realize maybe this was a little over the line of the power level that I want. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's going to be a constantly evolving thing. Doing as much of the work ahead of time as you can will save you work later and it will be easier. But just know that if you are going for power level consideration, removing stuff, that there's going to be misses based on the rest of the cube and what you have in there.
You ultimately get to a point where something is the most powerful card, right? It's not really avoidable, Cards having different functionality and being different does mean, you have some apples and oranges situations, but you're talking about a pretty small format, pretty small card size. Like one of the things that one of the cards does that is different is just more powerful, which you could determine over a large sampling of games. And sometimes that's good. The cards that you like the most, you should maybe aim to make those the most powerful. So the sweet thing is the good thing. That's a phrase I repeat a lot working on my cube. I want the cool thing to be the good thing. And try to aim for those cards to be your most powerful cards, or at least in the top half of things.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really great point. Like I love drafting the cards that I love. And everyone should do that. Everyone should make sure that you have the cards available, that you're drafting the cards that you love. And if those are the cards that are the most fun thing and they're also the most powerful thing, I think that's a pretty good sweet spot for any cube. And that's going to be mostly for you as the designer, as long as you're, the people you're playing against. Like it's one thing if you're like, I really love Young Pyromancer. I really want the Young Pyromancer deck to be good. Cool, great. I think you should make it good. If you're like, I really love Armageddon, it's like, well, that's fine, but chances are people don't love Armageddon as much as you. And if you're always the one with Armageddon is really good. People might not enjoy playing this cube as much as you enjoy playing it, which in the beginning might be okay, but that's going to have some diminishing returns as people return to help you play test this cube or just play it at all in the future.
And
just something to think about.
Kind of a point that's been in the back of my mind. I wasn't sure when I would bring this up, but I think that this is something I would like to have on the podcast. There's often a conversation when it comes to people drafting cube or really drafting any capacity where they finish drafting and they say, well, I don't even want to play the games. I just want to draft again. And that's commonly talked about as just like people like drafting. That's fine. For some people, that's going to be true. For me, when somebody says that about my cubes, I consider that a failure of my design. If we are drafting decks and we don't want to play with them, why aren't we just Googling cards? I have pursued the idea that, if we're playing a cube and somebody is completely dejected at the end of a match and they're just like upset about a card, I will listen to those concerns. Like, this is probably a card that should not be in my cube, or, there could be some external factors, are they in a bad mood and they mulligan a lot, blah, blah, blah. But in general, if it's this recurring thing where people feel horrible when they lose to this style of deck or this kind of card, and people actively are comfortable saying they don't want to play the games, that for me is a fail case.
Have you ever been personally offended when that's been said?
Everything is a personal affront to me, Justin.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to get that on the podcast too.
It hasn't come up in that way, but that's definitely something I have in mind, because a big part of the way that I refine my cubes is when I'm thinking about one of two things. That's usually what it is. It's not just like, should I play this card? It's, I have this card, I want to play this card, or one of these two cards. I run it by my friends to say, which of these cards would you be more excited to cast? Because I want everybody to be at the point where we enjoy playing the games.
Yeah, I think that's a noble goal. I live on the side of where you are. I love playing the games, and I'm also, if people want to draft or they don't want to play, I'm like, I don't. Yeah, I'd say I'm probably also personally offended. I was trying to rephrase it in a way that didn't make me seem like that was the case, but that would just be lying. I don't want to lie to myself here in front of everybody. So it certainly happened before. And I'm like, they always phrase it as like, I have to go after. Well, then I don't want you to draft. I want someone else to draft. If you have to go, if you don't want to commit to this beautiful thing that we're constructing together as a family, then you don't need to be involved at the start.
And to be fair, it's reasonable if you just literally have the opposite goal. For example, a friend of mine put together a old school Magic Tuberc, little 93, 94, and it's like powered. It's got shit like Moat. And we drafted, and I drafted Millstone, and I played a match against a friend who had the Moat deck, and like the Moat was really bad against me, because that just happens sometimes with that card. And I
mean, to be fair, that deserved.
Yeah, exactly. It was justice.
Yeah, that's justice.
But we played like a 3-game set, and like he cast the Moat in the sideboard games, and like immediately after the games, it was just like, so you didn't have anything playable in your sideboard? He's like, nah, like. And then, instead of changing places, we're just like, all right, we looked at the cards. We don't have to keep playing, do we? Like, no, that's kind of the purpose of a cube like that.
Yeah, it's a little gimmick to it, but that's okay.
Yeah, the draft and like the one Millstone versus Moat game, and like, okay, we'll revisit this in a couple months.
Yeah. Which card do you like less in cube, Ryan? Moat or Subtle Wreckage?
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm asking the hard-hitting questions here.
I think that Moat is more offensive, because I feel like if you put Moat in your cube, some of your motivation is status signaling. Like, check me out, I own a Moat.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's close. I think Moat is significantly more egregious. The fact that it's close for you really just says how much you hate Subtle.
I want to be clear that I do hate both a lot.
Yeah. I specifically hate Moat more because its only intent is to stop someone from playing Magic. Like, that's the sole intent of the card.
Yeah, the text box as printed is not going to convince you otherwise. And Subtle does at least put your opponent in a position where if they have like a Devil's Play or some kind of fireball, they can kill you with the extra mana or whatever. So there's certainly more play to Settle, and definitely the look at me, I own an expensive card thing with Moat. Yeah. Don't
care for it. Okay, so all right, back on track after we've tangented a little bit, but it was all relative to building your first cube. Another question that I think that this is an appropriate place to ask this is, are you going to be bothered if you can't achieve a design goal or achieve like a certain look or feel of your cube? Because again, it can be very frustrating if you start building this and you feel like you're not going to either make it for the look or the feel of the cube, or you like, let's say you get it to the point where you've put the cube together and you do your first draft and it's not, the cube doesn't feel or isn't designed in a way that you thought you had designed it. Like different things when you play the game are more important than you were expecting. The draft goes differently, like cards, people value cards in like a opposite way of what you were anticipating. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's bad, but like, is that going to upset you if things go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to. They're going to go wrong. The more hardened stance you have of what you want your environment to be, the better chance they have of something going wrong if you're putting these really rigid blinders on your design philosophy.
And sometimes it's the case where a card just plays way better than you thought it would. And those are really cool moments.
That's always fun. Yeah.
And it's like, all right, so I had a vision, a goal in mind. This was an outlier based on my expectation, but it's really cool. And my goal has shifted because I want to do this thing now. And that's beautiful. That's awesome. Like you want those moments. You start to live for those moments.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Then there's the other side of it where this is not a cube that I've written about, but something we've played a lot this weekend. I have put together a tempo Tuberc. There was a week on Twitter where there was a conversation about Delver of Secrets being bad in cube, which I generally agree with. And then somebody tweeted about Legacy saying Nimble Mongoose just isn't playable anymore. And I was like, these things are just true, but I'm mad about it. So I got to work on a new project. And I was trying to find all the things that work together for a really efficient 180 card cube. And one of the things that I tried was landfall creatures. I had Step Links, Akum Hellhound, Brushfire Elemental, because these are some pretty efficient ways that you get a little bit rewarded for flooding, but actually the way that they played out was you got a little bit punished for top decking them late or playing more lands than you wanted to in this environment. We've been shaving a lot of lands from our deck, and there was just I would have to change a ton to make them work, or I could cut these 3 cards and move on.
Yeah. I have a hot take.
Hit me.
It's not even a take. I hate Nimble Mongoose. I think it's dog shit. I hate it.
Wow.
I hate it, Ryan. And I knew that you would be offended by this. I've kept this thump from you for 12 episodes. I think Nimble Mongoose is terrible. I love Delver of Secrets, but I think Nimble Mongoose, I think its time has passed so far, it doesn't even know what it is anymore.
I beat the shit out of one of my friends with Nimble Mongoose yesterday, and I'm living for it.
I just think that I don't like the hoops you have to jump through. The people that played Nimble Mongoose in Legacy, and there is another prominent cuber, Anthony Avatolo, who's one of my personal friends and someone that I respect a lot, loves Nimble Mongoose. And the people that love Nimble Mongoose do these crazy acrobatics in deck building and like thought process to make that card good when there's just so many other better options.
Yeah, but this is what I want to do.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as you're recognizing that this is what I want to do, and that's the crux of the Nimble Mongoose argument, that is okay. That's fine. As long as you know it's not good, but I want to do it anyway, that's fine.
It is in this cube. It is good in this cube, and it is a pretty high power level cube, but I'm
sure you constructed an environment to make Nimble Mongoose good. I believe that. I absolutely believe that.
Yeah, but you have to like be of the mind that you want to do this thing and know that you're jumping through the hoops. That point is well taken. Still pretty upset that you could find it to hate something as beautiful as Nimble Mongoose, but we all have our flaws.
I think Nimble Mongoose has been bad since 2002.
No way.
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, I do. I truly do. I think there's such a short period of time because of the way, and I don't want to tangent too much and go down this path of like going through the different formats, but like after it left Standard, and that's what I'm talking about when it left Standard. 2003. After it left Standard in 2003, it was relegated off to Extended, where the deck that it succeeded in Standard was not viable remotely.
Dude,
then it
Temur Delver was literally the best legacy deck for like a full year.
Delver, we're not talking about Delver.
But Nimble Mongoose was one of the key cards of that deck. I want an open with this deck. I know about this deck. Many people want opens with this deck.
First of all, many people did not win opens with this deck.
Many people did. It won back-to-back week opens like in 2011 when it hit the scene. I won an open with it. There's probably other people.
Look, I think you want an open. Okay,
I think you just have to admit that you have hatred in your heart. That's all it is.
What deck did you call it?
Temur. Oh, Rogue Delver would be the deck at the time.
No, but it was Temur. But Delver. You didn't call it Delver. Well, Temur Mongoose.
Brainstorm, Wasteland, and Tarmogoyf were all the best cards in the deck. So jot that
Delver
down.
Of Secrets.
Delver
of Secrets.
Delver of Secrets was essential to being a good Brainstorm deck. But we're getting really off topic here.
It's too late. What would you say was the worst card of that deck? Would you say it's Nimble Mongoose and you simply put it into that deck?
Daze and Stifle are probably like the cards that you like talk yourself into.
I will absolutely. That is nonsense on Daze. That card is outrageously powerful. I hate Stifle, and that's totally fine. But it was also a critical function. You could have played virtually anything in the place of Nimble Mongoose.
It was really important against the Plowshares decks.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, the Plowshare. I mean, I'm not trying to go into a legacy diatribe here.
I mean, at this point, we can leave it to the viewers. I love Nimble Mongoose. It obviously has a good tournament track record in the year 2012. And Justin does not like it.
I don't like it. I love Delver of Secrets too. I don't think a creature has won me more money than Delver of Secrets.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where I land too, because I did have a lot of success with that card in Modern as well.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the overarching question. This is the third time that we're asking it back to Cube Draft because again, we've now gone through the stage 1 and stage 2 questions. What is your goal environment? How has this shifted? How is asking these questions yourself shifted? At this point, especially when you're talking about cube progression and what you want, the conceptual look of your cube to be or feel like, or talking about power level considerations. Now you're talking about budget. How are you going to play the cube? How many players? And you're asking all these questions. From that very initial question, before you ask yourself any of this, there's a very, very good chance that the answer to your question has changed. But it's important that you continue to go back to this and you continue to adjust your answer to your cube environment based on all of these other questions that you're answering. Because ultimately, this is going to be the identity of your cube, is what your cube environment is. Basically, this question is going to turn into your 20-second elevator pitch for your cube. If someone asks you, what kind of cube is it? The answer to this question, which is the question you've been asking yourself the entire time, that should be what you're going to be able to tell them. Mm-hmm. Do you agree or disagree with that, Ryan?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And actually, I run into some trouble sometimes, not on the elevator pitch, but when I name a cube. Specifically, I had a cube that I called the Devotion Cube, which was, we talked about this briefly, but it's not really published anywhere and it wasn't in depth, but that's the cube I was working on with all the monocolor themes. And by calling it Devotion Cube, other people got the idea that there was like a lot of gods. And could you believe that they thought there was a lot of cards with devotion, which there were some, but like the experience promised didn't match the experience delivered. And, for that reason and others, this thing is really important, like making sure that you are designing something consistent with your elevator pitch.
Yes. And the best way to do that is I think you beginning, middle, end, continue to ask yourself this question. And then as you go along in this process of building this cube up for the first time, asking this question again. Yeah. So,
and
go ahead.
Sorry. I just think that this is kind of an important point is when we're talking about making the cool thing, the good thing. And if your elevator pitch includes some specific archetypes, or you mentioned maybe like a tribal theme, and people draft your cube and the games with the tribal decks are decided by the opponent having a bunch of ways to destroy all of your creatures, then you probably have missed on your mark a little bit. Then you don't have a Goblin cube, you have a Wrath of God cube.
Yeah. I would say that is one of the easiest ways to misinterpret your goals. And that's kind of what we were talking about. Are you going to be bothered if you can't achieve a design goal? That's a really good example. Mm-hmm. And then you need to, that goes back into the other question, are there power level considerations? Well, if you're playing a tribal cube, chances are Wrath of God might be one step over the line for what you want this cube to be able to do, which is answer all of the cool things that the other X players are doing. And then one player is like, you know what? Well, here's the cool things, and what's the best way I can stop them? Oh, you've given me a lot of tools to do that.
This is I'm going to
use those tools.
Another board game sort of translation, but when I have a cube that's really synergy based, and the control decks, it's more about taking a controlling role rather than drafting a controlling archetype, where both players are kind of trying to do something proactive. It's actually really similar to how a lot of modern matchups look in the modern format, where yes, there are control decks, but generally it's going to be stuff like Dredge versus Prowess versus Heliod Life combo or Tron. And the decks all try to proactively do things, and they have a couple cards to poke holes. And a type of board game, it's called an engine building game, where you are putting together pieces for an engine, and the player who wins tends to have the engine that runs the best or is disrupted the least. And I kind of think of these as engine building cubes when they're deeply synergistic.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to look at it. Excellent way to look at it. All right. We are going to take our last break and come back and discuss some of our final thoughts for building your first cube.
Hello there from Dominario's Judgment, a weekly podcast for Star City Games with me, Dom Harvey.
And me, Ari Lex.
Where we bring you the latest, greatest, and downright weirdest things Modern has to offer.
Want to know what to expect for next weekend's events? We've got you covered.
Do you want deep breakdowns of the hot topics and decks in Modern? We've got you covered.
Just want to make sure you don't miss the latest nonsense before your opponents teach you a lesson about it in the queues? Oh yeah, we have definitely got you covered.
And when Modern Horizons 2 blows the ceiling off this format, as it surely will, we'll be here with you to pick up the pieces.
Find us every week on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Or if you want to head over to StarCityGames.com, we'll be right there alongside all the great content from all your other favorite content producers.
All right, so Ryan, after you've gone through this process and constantly evaluated your environment goals and some of the questions you've asked yourself, what other things do you want to keep in mind as you are going towards finishing this initial cube that you're building?
I think that the really important note that we're going to leave in this segment is that all of the time you spend thinking and iterating by yourself, you're going to just get things wrong in the most valuable session. More work goes into it at this point, but you're going to learn the most when you start playing. So no matter what the last hurdle is, even if you don't find the perfect solution, subtext, you won't find the perfect solution, maybe ever, but certainly not until you get busy playing. You just have to get a cube together. You'll get some stuff you like, some ideas you want to try. The most important thing, the biggest step, is when you have your card limit and you start playing games.
Yeah. I always tell people, because there are some people, and chances are if you're listening to this podcast, you might fall on this end that I'm talking about, that really want to absorb as much information as they possibly can about cube design, about how to make archetypes, about like new card evaluation. And they want to just read and listen and watch everything they can before they build their first cube. And to those people, I recommend stop, build the cube first. Is it going to be exactly what you want? Probably not. And that's okay, as long as you have the mindset of progression, which you're going to really need to continue to update a cube. But it's so critical of getting that first cube in your hands, because you're going to learn so much more once you have that you're going to learn significantly more after you have the cube in your hands and play it for the first time than any of the steps before. That stuff is important, and it's going to help you avoid some pitfalls once you get going with it. But getting the first iteration of that cube, how, like exactly what Ryan said, all of those things with identifying the number of cards, getting the cards in the cube, sleeving it up, physically having it in your hands, and then after that first draft, you're going to learn so much more than any of the stuff that we have talked about, because that is really going to help you the most on your journey. So I really recommend getting to that point as quickly as you can. And as long as you're open to continue to learn about your own cube, you're going to be in better shape than if you spend hundreds of hours conceptualizing a design before you do it for the first time.
And also don't think of it as a personal failing when things don't work. I mean, you're trying something new. It is a pretty significant undertaking. Like, people have done it before, but there's different context for everything. There's going to be a lot of reasons that, you have moving parts in your cube. You have different players playing your cube. If something that you try doesn't work out, there's more than one reason that can be the case. And it's actually pretty common that people don't draft things or certain decks aren't competitive. It's just because your friends don't like them, or maybe they are less familiar with drafting them, and you want to put them through the ropes. And if you notice things consistently not working, ask yourself some questions, ask your friends some questions. What are their games looking like? And until you start doing these things, you just have a list of cards on paper.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good segue to one of my points is when you are playing, it's really good to figure out what is fun for your group. You might have a group of people that are super competitive and that they are focused on the winning and the losing, and that is a bigger part of their experience. Maybe they are very casual people and they love the experience. They still want to play because you want to make them play, like we were talking about earlier, but they love the draft and all of the moments that happen in draft. Maybe it's people that love the big moments in games and they're not focused as much on the winning and losing, but just remembering the cube experience. Identifying what is fun for your group in addition to yourself is going to be a really critical portion of this process as you continue to draft. Because if you're unfortunately, and this kind of sucks, but if your idea of fun is different from your group's idea of fun, you're going to struggle to get drafts together, and you're either going to have to be staunch in your opinion of what fun is and then have to scrape together, or you're going to have to change your mind to a point to, I don't want to say appease the rest of your play group, but at least bend to their idea of fun so they will continue to play with you.
Yeah. And this is only tangentially related, but as a game store owner and someone who's been around a lot of tournaments, I have seen a lot of people engaging with Magic in different ways. And I have seen this twice, what I'm about to describe, which is completely berserk to me, because the first time I saw it, it's just so obvious what's wrong, what's happening here. But I have twice in my life seen somebody teaching another player Magic by having them play some ABC Magic deck against Dredge.
What?
It's like I said, I don't understand it. I don't know what.
Where
did
this
no
happen?
way a person could have this idea and have anybody agree with them and think it was a good idea. Anyone who has any idea what's going on is going to say, do you want them to hate Magic? Like, this is how you make people quit before they start.
It's not even Magic.
Yeah.
Well, you don't even get a sense of Magic. It's like, hey, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to teach you how to play Terraforming Mars, but I'm going to be playing Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is they're playing.
Well, I guess the analogy would be reversed based on length of the game, but either way,
it's like Plains Creature Go, and you're like, okay, replace my draw set, put these cards in the graveyard, and the cards just don't do the mechanics aren't the same. So they probably don't feel like they're doing it right. There's no way you can feel like you're doing it right. But to bring that, I don't want to. I do believe you. But I don't want to believe I'm scarred. I'm scarred from seeing this.
Yeah.
But to bring that back to cube, like, some people like dredge. That's fine. You're allowed to like what you like, but most people don't. And when you're trying to play with people for fun, you have to meet them in the middle. And like dredge is so uncompromising in how it plays Magic. The compromise is don't fucking play dredge with your friends.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the goal of dredge is to play as far outside of the rules of the game as you possibly can. It is Magic in the sense that if you turn over the cards, the backs will all look the same and nothing more.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, when it comes to cube, it's like, well, I like these decks, but people stopped coming to my cube nights. That sometimes the problem is you. It's really important to keep those communication channels open. Like, you want people to be excited to play your cube, not showing up to cube night out of obligation to you.
Yeah, you're gonna have good friends, I guess, if you're in either of those situations, though. Because if someone's willing to tell you, that's great, and if someone is willing to come despite not having fun, that's great in the sense of a friend. But you are abusing that relationship.
Yeah, that can only last so long.
You're by continuing to drop 6 cards in your graveyards at one time. Okay. Two other notes. Well, I don't want to, maybe more. All right. We talked about this earlier, but I really want to hammer it home again. Don't cut the cards you love. I just think, to me, that is really important. You might go and you might see people online because you've been reading a lot of cube content. Someone might say Mole Drifter is not good in cube anymore, or Oracle of Moldiah is not good in cube anymore. And that shouldn't matter to you. If you love those cards, put them in your cube and make them good. Like Ryan was saying, and I think that, again, that is a really great catchphrase for this podcast in particular, is make the thing, I don't know, what was it? You say it again.
Make the cool thing the good thing.
Make the cool thing the good thing. Playing with those cards that you love are going to bring you more joy than excluding them for any reason. I don't care if the reason is they don't fit into the archetypes that your cube is existing there. They don't. They kind of exist outside of the power level. If they're more powerful, then I would say make the rest of the cube more powerful. If they're less powerful, I would say, well, try to make them good. But having those cards in your cube is going to consistently bring you joy. I had the card Lightning Angel in my cube for a decade, a really long time. And we were talking about Nimble Mongoose. Lightning Angel hadn't been good for longer than Nimble Mongoose hasn't been good.
Despite its natural advantage against Nimble Mongoose.
It's a 3/4, Ryan, with Vigilance. Nimble Mongoose actually has no possible way of getting around Lightning Angel. It just sails over anyway. But having those cards in your cube, I promise you, is going to make it more fun for you, because every time I opened and got to play Lightning Angel in a deck, it just made me happy.
A friend of mine some time ago in one of our group chats, I don't remember. I know that what happened was I laid a beat for, I think it was like some day where it was like, good morning, what's good about it? Just like that curmudgeon-y shit. And then he typed in all caps, good morning, gamer. I hope you draft a Mole Drifter today. Is that better? And I thought that was hilarious. And I tweeted that, and multiple people, like, the tweet got like a good amount of traction. So like the weirdos started showing up, and multiple people I've never heard of who don't follow me are like, Mole Drifter is not good in cube. I'm like, welcome to the fucking block list. Who asked you? Who cares what you think? It's my cube.
Yeah.
What is the matter with you?
Yeah. We've talked about this before. I don't like when people tell other people that cards aren't good in cube.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just broadly.
Yeah, like you heard the word cube. That's not enough context.
Yeah, if you have like drafted someone's cube and you're like, hey, I want to talk with you about a card I don't think is good enough based on my experience playing in the cube, that's fine. That's a conversation. But just throwing it out there, oh, Mole Drifter's not good in cube anymore. Hey, Hey, can you hear me over there? I've never played your cube. I don't even know who you are, but Mole Drifter, you're an idiot for thinking it's good.
Gonna publish another vicious takedown of Mole Drifter.
But play with those cards that bring you joy. Next point. The process consistently should be rewarding. As you are going through this, if you feel like you're doing work or you don't want to take the next step, don't force yourself to do it, because Cube is so wonderful and it is a very daunting thing to get on the other side of this and get this first cube together. And if you are questioning that, just pause for a minute. You're going to come back to it, because if you had the willpower to start this process and the desire to really make owning a cube a thing, you're gonna want to finish that naturally. But it is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And if you ever feel like the process is not rewarding, just stop. Don't force it, because that's the way that you're going to burn yourself out, and you're going to start to resent the cube as a format or the function of owning one or building one. And that's not what you want. That's not a good way to start off your relationship with your cube that hasn't even begun to exist yet and it's fully formed itself. So just chill for a second, go do something else that doesn't have anything to relate to that. And then you're like, you know what? I want to finish that cube, and then come back and finish it. And you're going to be in such a better place as long as you don't force it to finish it. Even if you want to, I promise that it's going to be better if you just pause and make sure that you're not doing something that is not bringing you joy, or you're not feeling rewarded as you're going through this initial process for building one.
Yeah, and this is something that's come up in one form or another more than once on the podcast. When I am working on my personal projects, I have some thoughts floating, and some of them I have an idea of what I want to do or start doing with them. Others, I'm kind of waiting for some shower thoughts, some inspiration. I mentioned that it took me actual years of marinating the thought of a 2-player cube before I really got to work on it. I had a professor in college who, is a really elegant way to put this, but he would, call on people to answer questions in class like you do. And if somebody in the course of trying to answer a follow-up question, or just being asked a question they weren't ready for, if they are clearly stressing out about trying to find an answer, you just say, don't agonize. And I love that, work towards something, know what you want to do. Don't agonize.
Yeah. So that's look, ultimately, we are kind of just here to help you get started in this process. The amount of knowledge and understanding that you will have, like, after you put this first cube together, is going to be more valuable than, honestly, most of what we are saying today. But this is really for the people that just need help to get to that first step, because it is so much. It is a lot of work, and it is going to be daunting and scary, and you're wondering if you're going to be doing it right. But the great thing is, you're almost always going to be doing it right. Unless you just play it and you're like, I hate this. This is miserable. Why did I ever build a cube? Well, you clearly are not honest with yourself about a lot of other things if you got to this point in the process with that kind of thinking. But the point is, you're going to have fun with a cube, because it is fun. It is literally the most fun thing in Magic. And Ryan and I are biased because we have a podcast called the 540 about cube, but I also think that we're right. So it's the most fun thing.
I just haven't met the people who like Magic that don't like cube. Given enough exploration to it. Yeah, maybe one person, but they'll come around.
So, Ryan, do you have any other thoughts on this process, starting to build a cube?
I think that those most important notes are: explore what you like, cube with the cards that you like, make the cool thing the good thing, and just make something. That's like a common note you see about artists in any various artistic field. You're not going to do nothing your whole life, and then all of that waiting will allow you to produce your masterpiece. You're going to make a bunch of crap, or like okay things that you draw inspiration from. And, your masterpiece isn't like some wild epiphany you woke up to one day. It's a bunch of pieces of a bunch of quote unquote failures on the way.
I don't think I can say it any better than that, so I think that's a good place to leave it. You can subscribe to the 540 anywhere you're listening to podcasts, but including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, and of course, any local podcast application. Leave us a review wherever you can. We really appreciate that, whether that's a text review, whether it's a 5-star review. The more words and the more stars, the better. But tell us how you feel. And we would really love feedback. If you were in a place where you can leave us written feedback, whether that is on YouTube or anywhere else that you can specifically communicate with us, that is stuff that we seek out and we read because we want to make this podcast what people want to listen to. This particular episode, as Ryan said, was something that people had asked for that we wanted to make sure that we covered.
Yep, absolutely.
So continue to send that feedback, and we will continue to try to meet that feedback with doing content for what you're looking for. Ryan, where could people find your stuff?
You can find my tweets at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter, my articles on StarCityGames.com. This week I'm doing something kind of funky and fresh for the first time. This week's article is a look at a reader-submitted cube, some questions that this person had, some feedback on the cube broadly, and that's something. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how everybody likes that, and I'll be taking, if you have a cube you'd be interested in having some questions answered and maybe some general analysis, I'm open to looking at writing more articles like that in the weeks that are a little bit slower on the news cycle, as it were. So that's something that I'll be collecting kind of as they're sent to me. So you can tweet at me at Ryan Overdrive, and maybe it's just a quick question. Maybe we get into a more involved conversation. That's all cool. That all plays. And just in general, you can follow me for any positive tweets about Muldrifter and or Nimble Mongoose.
If you want negative tweets about the Nimble Mongoose, however, I am on board with Muldrifter. You can do so at jparnell1 on Twitter. And you can listen to my other podcast, which is Magic and Pop Culture combined. We always talk about whatever magic musings that we have at the time, along with movies, TV shows, music, other board games, etc. by searching Think Twice MTG on anywhere you are listening to podcasts, including whatever you're listening this to. Commander Versus is where I'm most known, and that is, of course, on Star City Games and YouTube every Wednesday, and I stream twice a week at twitch.tv/jparnell Monday and Saturday nights, and you can check out that page for more information on that. I enjoy building cubes. I know Ryan has built a ton, probably more than any other individual person that I've known. Ryan, you have a significant amount of experience. I appreciate you sharing your expertise with everybody.
Yeah, I have been busy. This is something that I'm passionate about, and I am more than happy to help other people grow and pursue their passions.
Wonderful. So hopefully, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. This was obviously not fully comprehensive, but a really good starting point as far as we are concerned. So thank you, everyone, for listening to the 540. We will catch you all next week.